The meeting to order. This is the Lake Bluff Library Board of Trustees meeting for Wednesday, January 24th, 2024. It's 7:03 p.m. And I'm calling the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Okay, Trustee Jerch.
Here.
Trustee Jardine.
Here.
Trustee Hayes.
Here.
Trustee Friedeman. Here. Quorum.
Okay, great. And then are there any additions and corrections to the agenda? No, and I believe there's nobody in our virtual room to address the board. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we can skip the opportunity for the public to address the board. That takes us to the approval of the board meeting minutes. There are two, one for December 12th, 2023, and one for the special meeting of January 10th, 2024. So I'll start with the meeting minutes of December 12th, 2023. Does anybody have any additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the
I
minutes.
move to approve the minutes from December 12th, 2023.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Do you have any abstentions?
Well, I was absent.
Right, so-
okay.
I
Bill would
can't
have
vote.
Okay, great, perfect. Abstention from Bill, and then there are a couple of people absent. All right, so the minutes for December 12th, 2023 are approved. That takes us to the special. Wait a minute. The special meeting of Wednesday, January 10th.
Don't have a
Dealt
copy.
with PPRT, yeah, it's on page 4.
For section 4, yep.
Section.
It's just not labeled, which might be a good suggestion to change. Call it special.
Before that.
Yeah, I don't see any of them.
There you go.
There you go. So it's double-sided. So the first meeting minutes were here, section 3.
Got it.
And
No,
then
that's December 12th.
section 4 is going to be your special meeting on January 10th.
Is it that one? No.
It looks like this at the top. Then there's a very.
Oh, got it. I got it.
I might suggest to the board a change to add the title special as a special meeting. But I technically can't
Mhm.
suggest that.
Well, I would make a motion to add the special, to make it Library Board of Trustees special meeting. Or would it be better to call it a special,
Special meeting of the
Yeah,
Library Board of
yeah.
Trustees.
special meeting? Of the Library Board of Trustees. Can I get a second?
A second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed, abstain? Okay, so we'll just title it special meeting of the Library Board of Trustees. All right, any other additions, corrections to the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 10th.
A motion to approve the minutes of January 10th.
Thank you,
I will second.
thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No abstentions. All right, so the minutes from the Wednesday, January 10th special meeting of the Board of Trustees have been approved. Okay, that takes us to Renee, the library director updates.
This is the page, so section 5.
No.
I'd be happy to share a little bit about the director's report that you have in your board packet. I'm very pleased to say in December of 2023, we did not cancel any library programs. We also didn't have as many as we typically schedule, but considering the amount of programs that we had to cancel for 2023, and you may recall from the article, I cited 13, which was the total number of programs the library had to cancel in 2023 due to staffing. I was very pleased that we didn't have to cancel any in December. In addition, I wanted to highlight that staff have had regular updates and presentations from me about the HR source salary benchmarking project, which we'll be talking about later on in the board meeting tonight. I also was very pleased to meet with Ishwar Laksamarian, who is the Lake Forest Library Director. We talked a little bit about the upcoming partnership program, Reading Between the Ravines, and I welcomed him for a lunch. Katie, can you, thank you. So in addition, I also wanted to highlight that the library is now keeping track and statistics of our notary services. The library, you may not know already, but we provide notary services for the library community. And we have a total of 4 staff members that are certified to provide notary services for the community. It's actually very popular, and the state now requires that we keep track of these completions monthly. So that is why it is now included in the report, and you will see it included going forward. I just think it's a really important service. It's a free service that we provide. Staff do have to take training and annual certifications every year. We just added a new staff member in 2023 based on the amount of interest from the community. And so with staffing limits or staffing, not increases, but we're getting back to our regular level of staffing. We're not quite there yet. We've been able to complete more notary services as they've come in. Those are drop-in, they're not scheduled services. So it does rely on having a certified notary in the library, but for the most part, I would say, especially with our adjusted hours, we are able to accommodate most requests, or staff can direct them to another time to come into the library. I do want to let you know that our adult services and technology manager, Martha O'Hara, has been doing a ton of work in various areas of technology for the library. And there are a significant amount of updates this month, as there was last month as well. We were very pleased to be able to distribute our brand new work from home telecommuting laptops to 5 of the 9 telecommuting staff that we have on staff. And these are the staff that have regular hours telecommuting. So as per last board meeting, when we approved the policy, staff were issued their laptops and received training about how to use the VPN. And so now we are able to provide work issued materials and supplies for doing work related things. Prior to that, staff were using their own personal devices. So that was a huge lift. So thank you, Martha, for that. I'll focus on building and maintenance from last month, but I'm happy to take any questions about recent building and maintenance issues from this past month too. I wanted to highlight a proposal that came forth to the Building and Grounds Committee. The library in our history has never offered period products, which is actually a pretty common thing for public libraries to provide to the public, as we are a community space. And so the Building and Grounds Committee had a proposal shared with them by Youth Services Manager Eliza. Eliza and I worked on the proposal together, and we look forward to installing period product materials in all of our bathrooms sometime early this year. So my guess is probably delivery will happen in February. It's already been ordered, and it'll just be a part of our regular building and equipment line. And many libraries nearby offer them as well through a company called AntFlow, and I've included more information here. So yes, that's really just high level of some of the key things I wanted to talk to you about today. In terms of statistics, there's actually a small change on page, let's see, so section 6 in the last page of that section, which says fiscal year FY 23-24 database usage usage by platform. So it's right before page or section 7. We updated this graph so it's a little bit more readable, and I wanted to make sure that the trustees had a sense of the impact our communications team and the efforts of that group have on online and database usage. So we added consumer reports to the library's selection of online resources back earlier in the fiscal year, but we didn't start promoting it until the fall. And you will see those numbers skyrocketing. It's actually the gray bar that you see here. These are our most frequently used online resources. And I think it just goes to show when we really work on strategizing to promote all the free services that we have to the library, people know about it. You know, we had people coming in, seeing that A-frame sign outside, scanning the QR code, because consumer reports is a really valuable resource that the library provides for the community. So I'm very excited to see such engagement in that resource. Upcoming, you're going to see a new resource called Rosetta Stone, which you know as language learning. And so library card holders will be able to use Rosetta Stone for free, and we'll provide or we'll employ a similar communication strategy to make sure that people know just how great of a value their library card is. So very happy about the update to the database graph. I think it's a little bit more readable, and I'm happy to answer
sorry.
any questions.
The consumer one is just missing on the last
Oh,
one, is
I
it?
got cut off, didn't it?
Was it pretty much the same,
It was
higher. Higher than any of the other ones?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Sorry about
And
that.
what's it, and is that, am I reading the purple one is LinkedIn?
Yes, so
Yes.
that's LinkedIn Learning. That one saw a really big uptick in October, as you can see.
Yeah,
But it kind of fell off in November and December. Sometimes, you know, that will happen with usage. It's a brand new resource, so we're really just starting
Okay.
our data tracking.
got it.
But you know, we have an A-frame for the LinkedIn as well. I think something like consumer reports, we talked about this with Rosetta Stone. It has such brand awareness already,
Yeah.
whereas a lot of library resources, people don't know the names like Freedom Flicks, like what is that? Or, you know, I don't know anything about Creative Bug. You know, Consumer Reports has that audience already. But LinkedIn Learning, you know, I'm surprised maybe we didn't see like a higher usage, but that just means we have to maybe do some more targeted promotion. But that was a brand new acquisition as well. I believe it was August or September, and then we promoted it in the fall.
Got it.
Because the other purple is Creative Bug. We also changed the colors a little bit. There's so many databases, we have to eventually kind of blend in color, but tried to delineate it a little bit more. There's more work to be done on the graphs. This is by no means everything, but a small change just to be able for us to see better and for you to see better how our money is being used by the board. Happy to answer any questions from the board at this time.
Is Rosetta Stone replacing Mango?
Yes,
Okay.
so Mango usage, I think it's really important for any public library to have a language learning online resource. Mango Languages was asking for an increase in pricing, which we did not budget for. And we've evaluated the usage across the last year, and it really has not done very well. And for a couple reasons, we decided to switch to Rosetta Stone. I think the brand awareness, again, with that, people pay for that themselves, and now they're going to see, you know, that they can get this for free from the library. They were able to price match the original Mango price, so we're not going to see any increase. I didn't plan for any budget increase for the e-reference line anyway, Bill, so
Okay.
we would have had to spend more for Mango. And so I'm confident that, you know, as Anna, Fifth House, our adult services librarian, talked to the vendor, they were able to meet our pricing requirements. So we signed on for a contract for a year, we'll evaluate and go forward.
Great.
And it has an app, which is something that we really wanted to make sure with any of our online resources, if they have apps, it's even better experience for the customers using them. So this one does. Great.
All right, thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
That takes us to committee reports and the Building and Grounds Committee. I can tell you that we met in December and we started going over the report from Engberg Anderson about the status of the building and various aspects like the handicap accessibility, lighting, so on and so forth. It's an extensive report and we didn't get all the way through. So we're meeting again
On the
next week.
7th, yep.
Yes.
2 weeks. from
2
now.
weeks, 2 weeks. On February 7th, we're meeting again to finish the report. And that's about all I have to say about that.
Can I add that Sean Kelly will be here to present to the full board even higher level overview of the report at the February 20th board meeting. So hopefully all trustees are able to attend. I made copies of the report documents in print. I'll also email them for the trustees as well.
And isn't that the one that Regis said he was going to
Yes,
attend to?
yes.
I
Well,
think
I hope
that
so.
is, I hope he does. That makes me so happy to see the village getting interested in,
Yes, yeah,
what
very.
we're doing, because I think that will, I think that bodes a whole new era for us. I really do. So, okay. Finance Committee.
So the areas on the finance, and I think we had our finance meeting after the last board meeting. We looked at 3 areas. One was the HR source, the salary benchmarking report, which we kind of went through and analyzed. And then that was tied then into the budget for next year with a recommendation to bring to the board tonight for approval. And then the last one, which resulted in our special meeting, was the PPRT discussion as to what we're going to be doing there, what we're going to do moving forward, and we will know the kind of results there. The village approved the PPRT backdating all the way back into the 1980s, 79. So that was a good success. So those are the 3 areas we looked at. I can't think of anything else. Then
Those were the ones.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Then the Engagement Committee, Sandy? Okay,
So the formerly Outreach and Engagement Committee is now the Engagement Committee. I am the chair. Also present was Trustee Graziano and Renee Grassi. So we decided on 2 actions currently. Okay. One, we're trying to figure out how to have increased board involvement in the community with the purpose of giving information regarding what the library offers and what the library needs. Renee will be going quarterly to is it the board meeting, the village board meetings,
I
or?
don't know if I've set a frequency,
Okay.
but I definitely want to be able to go. I think for a variety of reasons, but also just to show in spirit our continued collaboration and interest in both the village and library. efforts.
you wouldn't have to go to all of them. I don't mean to interrupt, but
No.
Bonnie and I could, or some of the rest.
Oh.
of
It
us.
might be an opportunity
Yeah.
to share responsibility and
Yes.
report out. I think that's a great idea.
So we're also looking at the chamber group list to see how we can reach out to other groups in town. Our second action was working on the trustee onboarding process, starting with I've reached out to 4 other area libraries, boards, to see how they onboard and whether we can use some of their processes to change ours, to make it more smooth and less reliant. How can I say that? Less reliant on the director,
That's
take a
very
little off
appropriate.
your plate.
I think it's very
Mhm.
appropriate.
That's what I.
Yeah, that's great.
Is it good?
Our new chair.
Great,
Nice.
great.
Thank you,
All
Sandy.
right,
Great job.
and then there were several committees that did not meet, so, I don't know if anybody wants to say anything about any of those, despite the fact they didn't meet. Anything to add? No, so that takes us to the December 2023 Financial reports.
I really don't have too much to highlight, except that we are nearly 100% received of our property taxes, which that's wonderful, frankly, because that money is going to sit there and earn some great interest. Speaking of interest, we earned almost $4,000 of interest this past month. That is also excellent. So that's the money that is sitting in our funds through the Illinois fund, where we don't even really have to think about it. So I just really am so pleased to see that. In terms of the revenue, I don't have anything else to highlight. But in terms of expenditures, I continue to work with the managers and staff to make sure that we're on target for some of our, for all of our spending. There are some lines that I know are going to be underspent with any year. That is pretty, it might happen. And there are lines that I anticipate will be overspent. Nothing that you don't already know, including building and grounds. Maintenance and building is already at 108% spent, but the board did approve overage, so that is known already. We are right there. No, you're fine. We did know already the copier would also be overspent because we did have to pay slightly higher costs to get a new printer and to sign on with our new agreement. So that is known. And we also have overage in the professional and contractual areas as well as legal fees. I will continue to be receiving invoices for legal fees, but again, all of this has been discussed at board meetings and for known reasons. Happy to answer any questions about the revenue or expenditure reports.
Is there any more discussion on the photocopier as far as what we might do with charging extra on color and black and whites to sort of cover that? Is that something that's...
That could be something that the board, if they so choose,
Okay.
wants to defer first to the, I mean, you may decide defer it to the policy committee first. You may want to suggest a discussion topic in a future meeting for the whole board to provide opinions and then go back to the policy committee. You may solicit staff feedback. I would love to see that anyway, regardless of what direction the board goes. From a staff perspective, I do know we've had this conversation since I've been here. Our copy costs are similar to other libraries.
Okay.
The only difference would be some variation in the color. Some libraries charge 50 cents per color, other per page per color page.
Yeah.
Other libraries charge 25 or 30 cents. So do I think it will make up for the financial challenges of the library? No. Is it another revenue stream? Technically, yes. We do have people come in for copies. I mean, tax season is upon us. We don't really get copies of tax forms like we used to. Public libraries used to have whole displays of every single number and letter that you could want. And now almost all the tax forms are available online and people have to print them out for themselves. So, I'm interested to evaluate copy usage going forward. And if the board so wants to solicit feedback from staff and have a discussion, we would, you would be open to doing that.
No, if we're comparable with everybody else, that's we don't want to be out on an island, and I respect what the staff thinks as far as what we couldn't do. It was just more of a, are we behind on that? It sounds like we're not.
We're not behind. It's a really good point, though. I'm glad we're talking about it because we do want to check in every once in a while to see where other libraries are at. And also we think about the people that do need to make copies and, is it an access thing? People still, but not as often, have printers at home. It's less and less common now for people to have printers at home. And so we regularly get feedback, positive feedback saying that, the library has quality printing, but cheaper than, Kinko's. And so it's a service we provide. It's not like we're, public libraries being a governmental entity shouldn't be looking for profit for a thing, but almost kind of pay for the services that we're providing. But now with the Kyocera, I can keep track of every month, the amount of copies we make in print. So we can stay on top of those numbers a little bit more. I'm happy to provide, annual numbers or quarterly numbers if you'd like.
We had talked about it in the policy committee
Yes.
and had discussed asking the finance committee. Discussed asking the finance committee because it would be a slight change to one of the policies, not a big one,
Yeah.
but just to make sure that we're not, the library's losing money over color copies in particular.
Yes.
So if it is even just benchmarking, what the cost is for the library and making sure that it's at least.
And the more months we have with this new copier, the more data we're gonna be able to have. So maybe it's worth reevaluating at a year of the anniversary of the new printer or the new copier. So we can kind of see
Yep.
what because it's seasonal sometimes. There's a lot more printing during tax season, let me tell you. So I think that's worthwhile.
And it's flagged for review in our little tracker, so we can make sure we. get back to it.
What are we charging now?
So it's 10 cents for black and white, 25 cents for color copy. 30, thank you. That's, I said it earlier. Thank you,
Yeah.
sorry. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and then, right, we need to budget differently too, if that was something. So something for the budget committee as well to look at next year.
Okay, are there any other comments, questions about the detailed revenue and expense report? If not, I would entertain a request for a motion to accept, to approve.
I'll motion to approve the revenue and expenditure report.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Sandy. So this is a roll call vote.
Trustee Jerch,
Aye.
trustee Jardine.
Aye.
Trustee Hayes,
Aye.
trustee Friedeman, aye.
Okay, the December detailed revenue and expense report has been approved. So next we go to the December monthly check disbursement, which is checks 15,870 through 15,904.
There are only two things I want to comment on here, and both Bonnie and Bill, who signed this month's checks, had the same questions, so happy to clarify. There are two cleaning companies on this list for two different checks. The first one, Best Quality Cleaning. You may remember before we signed on with Complete Cleaning, as we were finalizing that RFP process, I opted to work with one of the companies that bid to be our new cleaner. And I opted to work with them on a deep cleaning and floor wax and detailing. You may recall the experience was monstrous. This is the reduced cost. After much back and forth, this was the lowest that the company was willing to charge me. And so that is the first cost. And then, complete cleaning, that is going to be our monthly, it's not going to be exactly the monthly cost because as you see, we installed hand soap devices in our bathrooms now. If you go to our bathrooms, you'll see those. So there's a new supply of hand soap. We had been previously ordering from Amazon, like little handhold things. This is going to be a lot cheaper for us. So there's going to be a cost benefit there. And then, I don't think Crystal Cleaning is on here, but they're their old company. So just clarifying who everybody is in terms of, cleaning companies. Happy to answer any other questions too. We have a lawyer charge. Canukin is the tree company. You may recall I reached out to Public Works and asked if, because we had a tree limb back in the fall hanging over our neighbor's property, which was a safety concern. I called the Public Works first and I said, is this anything that you could do for us? It was really just a quick, kind of cut, and they said no. And so I worked with Canukin to do it. I followed up with Drew Irvin after that, and he said, should have texted me, we could have done that. Either way, it's an expense that's on the library property. So because we haven't delineated the financial responsibility of the library versus the village, which I do think will be such a benefit for us going forward.
Yeah.
I'll be able to know, okay, you can cut a tree limb, but you know, we need to cover this area ourselves, so.
Was that an oak tree by any chance?
It was the one, it was, I don't know if it was an oak tree,
Okay.
but it was, I can show, I know which tree it was.
The only reason I know that we just had our trees cut and they couldn't cut the oaks till after November.
Oh,
They're very,
Usually it's like,
very
yeah,
Yeah.
really.
oh, then it
dormant.
probably wasn't an oak tree, because
Okay.
Finucane would have said something, they
Yeah,
were
no,
able
they
to
were-
address it right away.
but they can if it's a danger.
Yes, okay.
So,
Well, and this was, so maybe it
Right.
was, yeah, not sure.
okay. Are there any other questions or comments about the December monthly checks? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I will move to approve the December monthly check disbursement for checks number 15870 through 15904.
Thank you, Ally. A second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Bill. This will be a roll call vote.
Trustee Jerch,
Yes,
trustee Jardine,
Yes.
trustee Hayes,
Yes,
trustee Friedeman, yes.
okay. There are no abstentions and the vote has passed, so we have approved the December monthly check disbursement. All right, that takes us to new business. So we have an action, our first action item is discussion of the board PPRT letter and vote to approve the intergovernment agreement with the village to collect historical, current, and future property replacement tax. So,
Jeannie, would you like to provide some context before we jump in, or do you want me to? Do you want to start?
I can certainly do it. I thank goodness for Renee's attending some symposia, as it were, of area library directors, because she found out something about the PPRT, which stands for Personal Property Replacement Tax, and apparently back in the late 70s, the state would levy taxes on your personal property in addition to your real estate property. And it got to be such a fiasco because people were obviously underreporting and it was very difficult to follow and actually get the revenue that they wanted to get from that. So the state decided to eliminate the PPRT and put everything into property tax. However, there were a lot of local what should I say, organizations that were tax supported that depended on this PPRT. So the PPR depended on personal property revenues. So the PPRT was established to replace those monies that would be dispersed to institutions like libraries, for instance, public libraries. And that started happening around 1979, 1980. Given our mixing of administrative issues and oversight with the village never gave us that money. And Renee found out about it by going to a symposium of library directors and found out some other libraries in the area who had discovered this and made the case to their village boards that there was money owed. And she said, oh, I wonder if we're in that situation. And guess what? We were. So that took us to a I think the first thing you did before talking to us was or after talking to us was to go talk to Drew, right?
In August.
In August. And Drew was less than thrilled to hear this request come in and offered us a paltry sum, at which the rest of us said, no, thank you. The amount at the time we didn't know, but we knew that it was considerably larger than what was offered. So Renee got into the weeds and found out what the amount was. And without interest over the period of time since 1980 to the present, it was right around $85,000 in round numbers. And Renee and Bonnie crafted a letter to the village board. Turns out the village board didn't know much about this, if anything, and they were pretty amazed to hear that this was an issue, and they also made a deep dive into it. Bottom line is we came up with Bonnie did a beautiful job of going in front of the village board and making a case for the fact that we owed this money, and in addition to that, have been underfunded for some time, and how we want to be made whole for these monies that have been rightfully by law to come to our library for many years. And fortunately, the board agreed, and I now have before me a document to sign where they will reimburse us for the PPRT, and going forward, we'll make sure that that will be a sum, and it's not a huge sum, but it will be a sum that will be included in their payments to us, in addition to our property tax payments that the village disperses to us. So, did I leave anything out?
Nicely done,
Thank
nicely
you.
done. I will add that the letter is in your packet, that after the January special meeting that you all hosted, actually, the letter was sent out after you made the unanimous decision to ask for everything. There's been a lot of things happening in the last month, so I had to go back in my timeline. After the December meeting, and the unanimous vote of the board, this letter is the letter that Janie was referencing, which is in your packet. And then, there was discussion at the, January special meeting, about the village's proposal, as Janie referenced. Since then, I'm very happy to report that as of Monday evening, the village board of Lake Bluff has approved the draft IGA, intergovernmental agreement, between the village of Lake Bluff and the Lake Bluff Public Library. Our attorney has reviewed this and had discussions with you all during the special meeting, and stated for you all, this is a very reasonable document and contract. And so the decision and discussion before the board tonight is to sign or approve, excuse me, the intergovernmental agreement between the village board and the library board for the PPRT replacement tax revenue.
And when we met last time, one of the comments was that there was some language in there that it was supposed to be for capital projects.
And it has,
And that looks like that's been taken out there.
yes, I emailed Drew, and they agreed to strike that, no problem. They updated the contact information. So the contract you have in your board packet is the updated contract with the updates that our attorney, Julie Tappendorf, recommended and advised.
At this point, looking for a,
I am, yes, I am looking for for comments on this, although I think it's been vetted pretty thoroughly at this point, including legal advice. Certainly been discussed amongst
yeah,
a certain group of us, and so I'm looking for any other comment, and if none, a motion to approve this intergovernmental agreement.
I'll motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement between the Village of Lake Bluff and the Lake Bluff Public Library Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Sandy. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, since this one involves disbursement of money and future disbursements of money, it will need a roll call vote.
Trustee Jerch,
Aye.
trustee Jardine,
Aye.
trustee Hayes,
Aye.
trustee Friedman, aye.
Okay, and there are no abstentions and no nays, so unanimous. We have approved the intergovernmental agreement with the Village of Lake Bluff to collect historical, current, and future PPRT. All right, the next
job, Renee.
action.
Good job.
Yeah,
The
nice.
whole
I do that.
Yes.
Maybe you can present at Directors University next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's changed.
Success story.
Yeah, and you're like, and I heard about it from him.
Right.
Thank you. I do think this was an incredible effort of us all. As you mentioned, Bonnie, the great discussion amongst, the conversations at the Finance Committee. There was a lot to consider, and I just want to remind you all of the words that I emailed you from Regis yesterday. Regis Charlotte will be in attendance at our February 2024 board meeting to talk of his and the board's collective interest and support of the library. I am very pleased about this, obviously, for the financial stability of the library, but also I think it really is an expression of the entire village board's appreciation and value of our institution. And so I just want to thank the board for passing unanimously, of the people that were here, unanimously this important IGA. And so with that, I'd love to ceremoniously pass the contract over to Janie and have her add her signature right here. They mailed it to me, express mail. So,
Okay.
yeah, and then just your title underneath. And what I will do is I will scan this before I leave tonight, email it to Drew and the village clerk, and make sure we both have copies. So we are all set with that. Today's the 24th.
Good.
Mhm.
Thank you. And
I'm
I
gonna
will-
give out the pen to anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
We're-
Put in a
it's still spring.
case.
Yeah. The $85,000
Yeah,
pen. there
well,
you go.
Yes. I am told and assured by Drew that as soon as they receive the fully executed contract, that they will disperse the monies. So I will receive an email confirmation, as I do for any deposit from the village. And as soon as I do, I will notify the Finance Committee and let you all know.
And now just go into the regular account.
It will start accruing some nice interest for
Okay.
us, so before we decide how it's spent.
Not that we have any dearth of things to spend it
I
on.
was just gonna say, I already
Yeah.
know about how 7,000 of it is gonna
Yeah,
go, but,
fair enough.
but yes, to that end, thank you all,
Thank
a
you.
wonderful
Thank
collaboration.
Thank you. All right. And then the next action item is the presentation, discussion, and vote to approve a new Lake Bluff Public Library competitive pay grade structure and pay salary scale. So I guess this will be let's see. Since Bonnie's not here, I guess it's up to you, Renee, to present.
Do you want to start off by sharing any words for yourself? I know that this is an important topic you've mentioned.
It is an important topic to me. Thank you for, asking me to do that, because I have, ever since I've been on the board here, and it's been a while now, I have been appalled at the salaries that are paid here. And it always seemed like there was something else that took priority over putting more money into salaries, and there were other obstacles that are no longer in the way. Just a new board, a new director, new president of the board, new president of the village, new village board. So many things have changed in the in the span of time that I've been on the board, that I really believe it's a whole new environment. And if there was ever a time to seek out money, because that's been the big issue, we simply do not have, and I've never served on the finance bill. But I am painfully aware that it has just not been in the budget to bring up salaries where I've always felt they should be. And still maintain the other things that the library does. And I really feel like the time has come to start working on that, not just chipping away at it little by little, but to make some substantive changes. So that's what I have to say.
That's great. Thank you, Janie. I concur. And also, you know, one of the things that a small library can do is work with a consulting service like HR Source to do this work for them. And of course, some libraries choose to do this in-house if they have the staff and the time. We did not. This was something I proposed almost immediately after evaluating salaries here. And frankly, a lot of other libraries right now are doing salary benchmarking between cost of living and inflation increases. Libraries in general just need to keep up. And so we were one of many organizations this year that worked with HR Source. And I would say for Bonnie and myself, we attended, well, I'll start at the beginning. I worked with Catherine O'Connor, who was the primary consultant for this project. The report that you have in your packet is quite comprehensive, and it covers the scope of the project as well as the findings. And so you've heard me talk a little bit about how we've done this, or how this work is done in libraries. HR Source puts out an annual survey to all Illinois libraries and collects that data every year. That was one of the many, this is one of 3 surveys that they use to collect data and benchmark us against. Secondly, the second survey that, or I would say the supplemental report that they used, featured libraries that I personally selected that I felt needed to be compared with at our organization. We talked about this at the finance committee. We talked about this at the HR committee. We are a unicorn among unicorns here at this library. We have a very high EAV in terms of taxing and property taxes, but we have a very, very low amount of staff. There are a variety of metrics that the supplemental report data showed us, and I selected libraries not only in our geographic area, but libraries that were similar to our budget, that were similar to our hours, that similar to our staffing capacity. None of these libraries listed in this chart here are exactly a match to us. But the truth is, about half of our staff live in Lake Bluff. That is an asset to us. They know the community, they have relationships with the people. And that is a certain cost of living compared to other counties and other communities. And so while, for example, we didn't compare so closely in budget or size to someone like or something like Highland Park or Fremont Library, the people who live in those areas and work at those libraries, and those libraries are able to pay at a certain level, they would be considered our peers just geographically. And also, if you think about employment, our staff could go to any of those nearby libraries to seek employment. So that's how that list of additional libraries was selected. And then lastly, there were a few library positions at our library that are not just library jobs. So for example, our administrative assistant, who has a lot of bookkeeping responsibilities, we wanted to make sure to compare that data on market, you know, private sector, nonprofit sector. Our technology manager, who is also our adult services manager. Technology managers exist in almost every industry now. So we wanted to make sure that that was on market with what that position makes, and so forth. And so when it was possible, the data was blended with the Economic Research Institute salary data that HR Source had access to. And so what did we find after comparing our job descriptions with other libraries and using this data individually for every single position? We found that 20 out of 21 of our job positions are paid under the midpoint, which is market value. If midpoint is not the middle of a job, it's essentially if you're doing a good job and you have the qualifications to work that job, that's the midpoint. Whereas minimum would be if you don't have all the qualifications, you're working on your certification before you're eligible to have that pay for the full pay for the job. So, and then maximum, obviously there's a range. So 20 out of 21 of our positions are paid under the midpoint, under the market value. So data to support everything that Janie said in the beginning. And so I have to acknowledge the finance committee. We did a lot of work, a lot of conversation about how we can address these inequities. The total amount of money that it will cost for the library to move everybody to the midpoint, and this is just this first year, to get everybody to that starting line for their job before we consider seniority, before we consider merit, before we consider all of those things, the amount of money it costs to do that is $150,000 more in our personnel budget. And we'll need to ensure that that money is there going forward every year. But not only that, we needed to ensure that there was increased money in IMRF, because IMRF retirement is a set percentage of your salary. And some positions increased $15,000, $20,000 more.
Do we match the IMRF?
So it's not a complete match. It's 7%, 7.5, and I'm gonna look at the chat to see if Martha can correct me. Employees have a set standard percentage that they contribute.
I'm
And-
IMRF.
Yes,
that's
through school.
what I'm asking.
Yes, and so and then that's just standard as your salary increases over time.
Mhm.
Social Security, we needed to budget more for Social Security because that is a set amount, a percentage amount of your salary as well. And so, and we, as an IMRF agency or organization, the whole state of Illinois, because Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund is what IMRF stands for. That percentage is set across any job, across any salary range. If you work more than 20 hours a week, you are mandated to receive IMRF benefits. So that's why so many of our staff are less than 18 hours a week. The library has historically saved money in that way. Staff that work 20 to 30 hours a week receive benefits.
So
of
they're not
IMRF.
receiving retirement benefits at all. The ones under,
No,
oh, okay.
IMRF
Social
requirements,
Security.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, IMRF, that triggers at 20 hours a week.
So employees can get both IMRF and Social Security. They pay into both systems.
It's not like TRS.
Okay.
It's not this,
That's what I was wondering.
right?
Okay, yeah, the school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. So yes, but not all of our staff are eligible for IMRF.
Gotcha.
Mhm. Yeah. So, I just want to acknowledge the finance committee, a lot of work to try and find where this money is coming from. We're going to talk about grants when we get to the budget. That's going to really help us and potentially make time for us with making adjustments with, however the board decides to move forward with financial planning as our board retreats coming up. Conversations with Regis and the village board will make opportunities for the library. I'm confident there. But as I mentioned, there were four positions in particular that needed to be adjusted. The total amount needed to be adjusted for those four positions alone was over $85,000. This is life-changing. But this is life-changing what you're doing here. And I just want to acknowledge and thank all of you for your commitment to the staff. This is a huge demonstration. Well, you haven't approved it yet, but you know what I mean, as the support for this work, to find the data, to actually be interested, to compare us. And going forward, there needs to be management of the salary scale. So In sections 13 and 14 is what you're actually going to be voting to approve. These different pay grades are the new pay grades for the Lake Bluff Library. They were created based on the salary data, based on the job descriptions and the level of work, comparing our libraries to other libraries. And this is the recommended for our size, for our, and also for our staff who have different educational requirements for different positions. So, every job position now, they have a job description, which is amazing work. Thank you to the managers for helping do that.
You did most of that, didn't you?
We all did it together. I would say, it was a great learning experience. The managers were able to get to learn how a job description is created. They met with all of their staff to be able to understand what their job roles are. You know, I brought my experience in writing job descriptions to them in terms of like how to format them. So, I mean, not to done, you know, everybody put in their efforts there.
That's amazing professional training that you gave them.
Thank you. And what's great about having a job description from an employee standpoint is they know what's expected of them. Not only that, now they'll know what they can expect for pay. So every job description is going to have a pay grade. They're going to understand what that midpoint is, and the midpoint being that market value should be adjusted every year for inflation. HR Source puts out recommendations for, you know, cost of living or what they see in the market of libraries. They're going to recommend to me as a client now, adjust your salary schedule, your pay structure, X percentage every year. And that would just be to keep up with, you know, the market, to keep up with cost of living. As you see in section 14, these are the different job titles. So it's very exciting. We have job titles now, we have job descriptions, we have minimums, midpoints, and maximums. As you can see, some of the library positions are exempt, so that means they're not eligible for overtime. That is an actual definition through the government, the Fair and Safe Labor Laws. I forget actually if that's the correct acronym, but they talked about it in Fair Labor Standards Act. Okay, I got some of them right. The idea that this level of work or this type of work should be exempt from overtime. So for example, management jobs are often exempt positions, whereas part-time positions of a certain skill or responsibility often are not exempt. And so they provided that guidance for us. And based on those skill levels and educational requirements, that's how the grades were developed. And so we have 9 of them now. And I think, again, from a organizational transparency aspect, this tells employees exactly what to expect. And it puts everybody on the same playing field. And there is, you know, a lot of transparency about where you start in a job and then where you could end up in a job, based on merit and all of those things. So in front of the board tonight, you have the decision to vote to approve the new pay grade structure and the new salary scale. This will, if approved, this will go into effect May 1st, which is the first day of the new fiscal year. And so as we talk about the budget tonight, the money has been incorporated to make all of the adjustments for all of the staff starting May 1st. And then going forward, we'll talk about year 2, because we'll have to talk about additional adjustments for seniority and merit. I don't anticipate it will be the same price tag, but we're catching up to where we should have been all along. And the management of it going forward is going to be a lot more reasonable financially. And of course, at the end of the day, we're paying staff what they deserve for the value and the educational requirements and their skill that they bring to the table. Bonnie, during the village board meeting, talked about how this library it's a plum job. It's a plum assignment, she said. You know, anyone at, you know, Lake Bluff Public Library should be happy to work here, and, you know, that should be recognized. And she talked about the discrepancy between pay. And I think this is a long time coming. I've had individual conversations with every single staff person wanting to make myself available to them, talk about the adjustment that they're getting May 1st, and answer any questions they have in my hopes to, you know, just again, keep transparency and have open communication, because this matters. You know, their work here matters and they are valued. So happy to answer any questions about the report or the salary structures, the two documents that HR Source developed as a result of it.
Can I ask, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I just was wondering on, page 14, pay grade 2 and pay grade 1, why the range midpoint is the same as the range minimum?
Yes.
Or close.
Well, let me tell you, so couple things. The library a couple of years ago decided to move the starting salary for the shelver position and the summer reading program club position to $15
Okay,
to match or to get ahead of the state's requirement for minimum wage. And so in doing that, they didn't make any other changes. I think there was like $1 or $2 change for maybe one other job level. But essentially what they did, without making expansive changes and only adjusting one job, it shrunk the pay structure because
Okay.
people were making similar money. I mean, if you look at pay grade 3, and this is what they're recommending. It was actually less. It was like 15.9 or $17 after your recommended changes. So essentially what happened was this $15 minimum. I mean, we don't have any wiggle room because it's a state law. So the minimum, there isn't any percentage of, what does Bonnie call that? The range where, the compa ratio figure. So like the range between under and over, there's no under because we can't go under $15.
oh, I see, okay,
Sorry, I got
Okay.
there. Does that make sense?
yes, absolutely.
Okay. But in doing that several years ahead of time, even though it was good for that shelver position, we were able to say, hey, teens, you know, or whoever, apply for this job, you'll be making $15 an hour. There's still some libraries that only pay their shelvers $13, $12. They haven't made this change yet. But the actual organizational effect of that was everyone else on the structure. I mean, I have stories from staff, a lot of resentment built from that because other job positions weren't changed to reflect and be adjusted after that. So someone could come in with a high school degree, not even a high school degree, we don't require that for shelvers, and be making $15 an hour. But then there's this other position that requires a lot more responsibility, a lot more educational requirements, and they're only making a couple dollars more. And this is the adjusted one. So I hope that explains.
It does,
Yeah.
thank you.
Can I ask
Yes.
of in the report with the 7, I guess so the 7 employees that are currently being paid under
Minimum.
minimum.
Mhm.
So when you're referencing the May 1st changes for everybody,
Yeah.
that is for everybody under the minimum or for everybody who the 20 of the 21 who are under midpoint?
It's the 20 under midpoint.
Okay. And then, just out of curiosity with this report, I didn't see it noted in here, but were there particular positions for the folks that were paid under the minimum that were concentrated in terms of these pay grades? Was it in a particular pay grade or was it across the board?
It's across the board.
Interesting.
I'm gonna reference the pay grades. The biggest discrepancies I saw actually were pay grades 8, 7, and 6.
Okay.
And I think there are a couple reasons for that, and I won't go into too much detail today, but it's a lot of the historical context of this library, not writing down in a document like a job description to say you are responsible for X. And not having an equitable plan to say, okay, I'm going to adjust everybody 3% every year or 2% every year. But, you know, these people for merit are going to get X on top of that. Some people experience no raises at all. for years and were told that, and other staff received raises. So there were not equitable practices, and eventually we're gonna talk about the policy, but really aligning to that compensation and ethical policy. It costs more money to pay staff that have multiple degrees. It just does.
Absolutely, and as it should.
Yeah, I think you're paying for the quality. I mean, we want high quality staff at all levels, absolutely. But as you move up, you know, you have 2 degrees, you have a master's degree on top of that. That should be compensated as well. And this library chose just not to have those benchmarks.
And then with because I know we didn't have the pay grades until this report.
I
and
know,
we
it's
didn't have-
exciting.
So it's hard to do this, but have you internally kept, like, mapped this suggested or proposed salary scale against what those actual positions have been paid? Just curious out of, like, you know, if we're to look back in 10 years and someone were to say, okay, when they made this change, we knew that all the positions that went into level 7 were paid X amount to X amount, and here was the actual salary scale is adjusted to. Just to your point about, like, the historical lack of, you know, writing things
Transparency.
down. Yeah, and just being able to point back to it, because obviously this is important to continue revisiting as this discusses. But in the future, if you know, new board, what,
Yeah.
you know.
So what I have that's not included in this packet that Bonnie has seen, that Bill has seen, that I'd be happy to show any other board member directly, is a list of every single person in the organization, their job description, their current salary prior to any adjustment, and then how much it takes to bring them to the minimum, and then how much it takes to bring them to the midpoint. And so we have, as an organization, have those historical documents. It's not going to be readily available because it has individual names. There's confidentiality, obviously, but we can see the discrepancy between the previous and the current, and we'll be able to go back to this point in time to say, okay, this increase in personnel was directly related to each and every individual staff person for this amount, and this is why. There's so much data there. It even breaks it down to see, like, I know I showed you, Bill.
Right.
One position has 3 sets of survey data attached to it, because it's not only a library position, it's not only the libraries I pointed out were included in that, but also it has, like, private and nonprofit data too, and it's blended in a certain way. So the more information that I'm gonna get and the managers are gonna get is what percentage of their job description is leaning towards this area of work. What area of their job description is leading towards this level of work? Is it 50% bookkeeper and 10% library? Is it 90% library and 10% bookkeeper? Obviously, the data we look at is going to be different if it's 90% bookkeeper and 10% library. It's going to flip how much they're recommending to be paid based on those responsibilities. So now, every year, the managers and I have to update job descriptions to see if anybody's job has changed. And then for me to go and say, okay, if that job changed, what implication is that for their pay? Are they moving up in pay grade? You know, I can work with HR Source to benchmark one job. I can do that. Libraries do that. So I know I shared more than you were asking, but
that's exactly what I was at. It was just like to
Great.
have that historical touch point.
Yes.
It's like that idea of, like, we were, you know, this was all wiped clean and there was a new director and a new board that they could look back and say, okay, like, above board, this was done. That could, because you did not have that.
I did not have
reference.
that.
So
Absolutely.
making sure that's memorialized. And then I fully lost my train of thought. So
I'm sorry, I went on.
nope, it was like in that moment it happened. So I am going to
If you think about it.
think
later.
about that.
Great questions. I appreciate it.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
I'm
Guide
just wondering
Ellie?
about merit. Like you talk about merit, how does that?
It doesn't. So my questions when I got here was, how are people's salaries determined? And nobody really knew. How are job descriptions determined? Nobody really knew. And when I started asking questions, historical questions about how raises were addressed, that's when I started learning very clearly, there was just a lot of inequity in the process. So some people received raises that may have been more merit-based. Other people did not receive raises, even when they were told nobody's getting a raise this year. There is a history of that. And so my goal is, as we address this salary structure, this pay structure, there's going to be a percentage of increase that all employees are going to get. This is how it worked at my county library when I was in Minnesota. Everybody knew what that base percentage increase was based on inflation or what have you. And then I'm going to look at how much money I have in the personnel budget, how much room is there for merit. And then I'm going to give the managers a set percentage, 1 to 3 additionally, or whatever it ends up being for that year. I need to budget for that. I like data, I like numbers, I want it to be predictable. And then the managers, based on the performance reviews that I end up reading and evaluating anyway, all of staff performance reviews, they're going to recommend a merit increase. So staff will know from me, everyone's getting a cost of living increase, here's what that is. And then based on performance reviews and your performance, this is what your merit's going to be.
So 2 separate components.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, someone might get 2% for the cost of living that everybody gets, and maybe that year, the max extra merit percentage they get is 3. So then they would get a 5% total increase. That's using examples, but that would be a very, in my mind, like methodical way of going about it. And in a way that managers can provide input on their performance, because I don't know the individual performance of an employee. That's their recommendation to me. And then of course we would talk about it and approve it. But ultimately it comes from, how much money we're gonna have to budget for that. What kind of budget are we looking at for next year's personnel line? How much of an increase, are we going, some libraries, what they do is just increase 5% across the board just to give them some wiggle room. And then maybe not everybody gets 5% based on merit, but at least what amount of money you're working with.
I did remember.
Oh, good.
Bird brain thought, because I was thinking that was a great segue now that I'm hearing you say that.
Perfect.
Activated a deep part of my brain. Building off what Sandy said, is it worth taking a look at, once you kind of have, now that we have this information, you go through the process, is memorializing it in the personnel policy to say, this is the general process of how it, and then we would obviously include the salary scales and update them annually as necessary, but to make sure that that's super clear, and maybe it's just an example in there, but thinking about new employees who are referencing it. And then the second piece was, will you plan on adding the salary range to any job postings?
That's one of the things I talked about with Bonnie. I know I talked about at finance committees and probably HR as well. Organizations now are super transparent about the minimums, the midpoint. They'll even say, after 6 months, you're moving from the minimum to the mid, and this is what that amount is. I absolutely think starting May, when we're live with this, we absolutely should. I think that will only help entice quality candidates to the library.
Yeah, I agree.
And again, people need to live, they need to be able to plan their lives. And so I'm very happy with that trend of transparency, and I would be incorporating that after May 1st, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's, I see it in the nonprofit space a lot, and adding in even a note that says, based on a salary benchmarking report completed in 2023, the salary range for this is blank.
Yep.
And it's sort of like when you have your non-discrimination statement.
Right.
It's like it lives on every job description or application posting.
Very, very often libraries will have these documents public. Now they're public anyway, just because by the nature you have to approve them. But just going back to your first question, I absolutely would recommend that the board defer a conversation to the policy committee. I've already sent the sample compensation and philosophy and policy committee document to the bylaws and this document in here. I think I already sent it to you. And so what we could do is use this as a basis and then include what you just said, what we talked about with cost of living increase plus merit. That is the process for Lake Bluff Public Library. So the sample is something that HR Source provides all of their clients with anyway. And the annual review and pay increases, it kind of, basically, it's an example of what you just described.
Can I ask you a question, Ally? How much does pay typically in the nonprofit sector depend on merit? And who is the person who evaluates?
Yeah, in terms of raises or in terms of establishing sort of like where someone might fall in
I would say in terms of raises.
Typically it's done similar to what Renee is describing. So a cost
Okay.
of living increase that's uniform across the board. And then within the budget is sort of an allocation of a certain percentage. The exception would be maybe in some sort of like performance-based organization. So schools occasionally do it where they would take like an achievement, some sort of rating that they create internally, and then they have a set amount of money and they allocate that based on position. So for example, a special ed teacher might get 10%, of this amount that is allocated based on some sort of internal achievement metric, but that's not very common.
Okay.
I find that occasionally in charter schools or schools that have a little more autonomy in terms of personnel. But yeah, often it's managers determine and evaluate. So pretty much exactly what Renee's describing.
Well, the reason I ask is that the whole idea, from my experience with this, and Sandy, maybe you can corroborate, the whole idea of merit pay is kind of anathema to teachers. There's just so many ways to abuse that.
And understand merit as
Yeah. But I would say a library is while has similarities, it's a very different situation. So
If it helps,
I have to wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
and maybe merit isn't the right question or right word. It might be performance or achievement. I don't know, but if it helps, every library I've worked at, your performance review is tied to the amount of increase you receive. Which in my thinking is kind of the definition of merit. But,
Mhm.
a lot of libraries who are county libraries are unionized, and a lot of this is totally different.
Okay.
If you're in a unionized library, public library, county system, it is very different. And in fact, the raises are not tied to performance. So we are not a unionized environment. And at the same time, I think, because of that, there's flexibility in what we have in terms of our process that we can develop that meets the needs of our library. I'll also say that every library I've worked in Illinois did this system. There are very few libraries in Illinois now, public libraries, besides Chicago Public, that are unionized, although it's different, it's changing a little bit, but most county library systems in other states of the country are union environments. Illinois is unique. And because of that, I mean, we have just so much funding in Illinois libraries, and it's just like above and beyond a lot of places. So there's freedom in the structure of the governance of a public library, since it's a standalone and not part of a larger county system where that might apply.
Thank
I
you.
will say also, just to add to this, a lot of nonprofits I see, it's not based on like a number, the way you'd say, oh, well, X% of your students are meeting or exceed, which is what
Right.
when I was early on in teaching, like always the benchmark. And that's tough. I was a special ed teacher, and that's not fair to judge kids that way either. But anyway, that is a soapbox for another day. But what I see oftentimes is a rubric that is a narrative, qualitative rubric that's based on the core values of the organization. And it's usually across 4 categories of, like highly effective, effective, minimally effective, or least effective. And there's usually that way that they tie performance to qualitative indicators, and it's usually based on like a 360 type survey, similar to kind of what Renee completed. So you've got your own self-assessment that's included in this rating, your manager and a peer, that kind of thing. And that is very common, I would say, at nonprofits, especially. I've had like 2 in the past 2 months who've developed a revised version of that. So
And libraries too. I mean, Martha's listening. you know, I know Katie can sort of hear too, but, I'm updating our performance evaluations to more closely align with the job description, because here's the job, here's the expectation. The evaluation tool should
Mhm.
align with the
Exactly, yeah.
expectations. And, just to help, support the organization moving forward, that's exactly the direction that I've already told the managers these evaluations are going to be. So there will be a self-assessment for all staff, and then that will be tied to their job description categories. The manager will evaluate based on, essentially, I'm using my evaluation that we developed as a way of going about creating the new staff one. So yes, you described it exactly.
There's also an element usually of tenure, just amount of time. Long term.
Seniority, so I guess coming back to budget, this first year is just to get everybody to
Totally.
that first starting line.
Yeah.
But the truth is even just getting all the librarians to the same rate. I've got some librarians that are a year in, less than a year, and I've got some librarians that are 15, 20 years in.
Mhm.
So going forward next year, we're gonna have to account for some additional adjustment.
So like a longevity stipend or something?
Not a stipend, I think about it as making up for the years of, that they haven't been paid at the
Yep.
rate that they should have been paid.
And
Um,
the experience level.
Yeah, and the
Experience level for that extra 10 years. For
Correct.
that, kind of a little bit
Yeah.
as you break down
Yes.
sort of three components
Mhm.
and the more senior, you're
Yes.
gonna have more responsibility and then
Yes.
should be
Yeah.
compensated.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I have seen that too with the way these pay grades are structured, that you would have a level 8 pay grade and then number of years of experience
Yeah.
and the, you know,
Yes.
the salary for each of these. So you get a bigger
Mhm.
matrix as you kind of build it out. if
Bigger
you're looking
libraries
at
have that too.
tenure, yeah.
And again, like the more methodically you can map this out, the more transparency the employee has, and they're not, you know, building resentment about who got what. It's just all right there, very mathematical, which is really my goal.
Yeah, and then you can look back in your records and
Yes.
say, hey, here's, you know, the trajectory and the growth and
Yeah.
evidence.
Yes.
behind.
So staff, as I've been meeting with them, what I'm saying is this is to get you to where you should be market value next year, 24, 25 or 25, 26. 25, 26. That's May 1st. There will be adjustments, and then what's gonna happen is the whole organization, salary-wise, is gonna be a lot more stratified. You know, it's not gonna be these chunks, you know, people that have been here longer and have achieved here, you know, they'll be receiving that. And that'll be conversation with the manager. We'll be talking about how much money we need to budget for that.
Right.
You know, I'm gonna start thinking about it even now. So yeah.
Great. Okay.
This was huge. I feel like we've talked about this for 6 months and that's awesome that it's
It is huge.
here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it's a big step to get to that, and then now the next part is the
Yeah.
refinement part.
Yes.
To get it.
Yes.
Where it's
And I
equitable and fair.
What's helpful for me and my role is this is a small library. I do work with every staff person in some way. The managers are continually, you know, growing and learning about, you know, having one-on-ones with their staff, supporting their own growth and learning of their employees. And, you know, there's something written that says, oh yeah, this is what you're supposed to do. It will only benefit the organization long-term. You know, well after, you know, some people have retired or, you know, changes happened. This is some really foundational change. So I appreciate the board support and the finance committee for helping make this happen.
And can you said it was 84,000 for the 7 positions?
For just 4, I'm naming 4 that I know of off the top of my list. Like there were the 4 that I showed you.
Right.
Okay,
150 for the total.
for the
One
total,
fifty-
including the IMRF matching?
No,
No,
we're
not-
gonna talk about that in the
Okay.
budget. This is
Got it.
just salary.
Thank you.
Which is another reason why, as you all talk about the financial sustainability, you can kind of see where my self-evaluation 6 months ago, where I was like, I'm worried. I knew a lot of the stuff, I didn't have the data to show you exactly yet where we're going, but you know, the library has to plan out building capital needs, the library has to plan out personnel needs. If the building expands, we need more personnel, you know, like technology. So this is a big step, and I just want to say thank you again for your support.
Great. So I guess I will be looking for a motion to approve the new Lake Bluff Public Library competitive pay grade structure and the pay salary scale
Effective May 1st.
effective May 1st of 2024.
Just gonna check.
I'll motion to approve.
Thank you, Bill.
I'll second.
Thank you, Sandy. And I think this will require a roll call vote.
Okay, trustee Jerch,
Aye.
trustee Jardine,
Aye.
trustee Hayes,
Aye.
trustee Friedeman, aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. That is passed unanimously.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you.
Right.
So,
May I pause for a second? Martha knows that it's a mulberry tree that we cut down. We had to.
Oh, okay, okay.
And so that's what she popped into the chat to say. So thank you, Martha.
Thank you, Martha.
No restrictions.
Right,
No
no
language.
Yeah.
okay,
Thank you
so, next, we have the presentation of the budget by Bill and board discussion with the idea of being able to vote to approve and adopt the FY 2024-25 budget at the end of the discussion. So Bill, it's all you.
Okay, so we've gone through many iterations of the budget. The main part is really in the staff salaries, and the other thing that Renee and her staff did was to look at basically all the accounts, kind of from a zero budgeting standpoint, as to what accounts could be adjusted, what things we're using, what things are needed. And so went through and took a look at all of these accounts. And so in some cases, those accounts went down where the feeling was that it was that wasn't needed. The other thing we looked at is in the grants part of things, which would be on the last page, as to where the funding was going. And this was all, this is all pre-PPRT numbers as well.
Yes.
So at the time, we knew what next year's PPRT payment was going to be, which was somewhere in the region of around $5,000. But it didn't include what we got from the village. So that's additional to what we have here. So some of the funding that's coming were on different grants that Renee's going to be looking at. We also have the $100,000 grant from the state of Illinois, which I don't know if we want to talk through that as far as from what you said about. Sounds like we've got to use it or lose it.
Yeah, that email. I have a very short turnaround. This is a separate grant. The library was issued this grant back in 2018 or 19. I believe it was 19. Martha, feel free to correct me. And it was $100,000. Thank you. I appreciate it. It was $100,000 for capital expenses. Now, at the time, that library leadership and that library board had identified a possible remodel of the first floor space, moving the service desk over. And so that was really the plan and the scope of this project. And then the grant was applied for, it was awarded, but it was never dispersed. And then COVID happened and changed really everything. And now, as we know, the future of the library building is much more unknown, and there are many more possibilities financially that the board will explore at the board retreat with our financial consultant presentation. Anyway, we still get the money. It was finally dispersed. I received a couple of trainings. I've had meetings with my grant manager. I have to expend and submit for reimbursement before July 1st. So some of the emails I sent, and I know there have been many this week, and I apologize, but I wanted just to help keep you all informed. about why I'm prioritizing safety and security measures for this grant. I got the approval as it relates to capital funding and capital improvement. That's what the grant is for. So I also didn't want to pigeonhole us and say, yeah, let's fund a new service desk if we end up doing something much different for the whole library. In a similar conversation, Ally and I are going to be working on a grant through the state of Illinois. They extended, remember there were two grants we talked about at one point, the Live and Learn grant for construction for libraries, and then there was an accessibility grant. The original deadline for that was January something, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to meet that. Well, they extended the deadline to mid-February. And so I came back from vacation a little bit more spicy, ready to go. And we already have the building accessibility report. We have all the documentation to say where we're not in compliance. And I was also able to ask Engberg Anderson for a quote for proposal to update all of our interior signage. Remember when we talked about all our signage is incompliant? You'll hear more next month. So we're applying for a $50,000 grant and that deadline is mid-February. I don't know when it'll be dispersed. Anyway, and then we could also apply for the Live and Learn construction grant, which comes up again next January. So that's going to be within this.
So are there
fiscal year.
parameters to that?
There are for every grant,
Yeah.
right? And so I actually, that's what I was talking to the finance committee. I think this is an extremely conservative amount in terms of miscellaneous grants, but I also don't want to overshoot.
Index.
Right, exactly. And so we already know we're going to get $100,000 reimbursed to us. It's probably going to be spread between this fiscal year and next fiscal year, because I don't know when I'm going to be able to get the work done and then to get it reimbursed, but it has to be submitted for reimbursement by July 1st. That's in next fiscal year. So we know there's going to be money coming in anyway.
So that 100,000 and then the 50, the 150 total is that 50 that we're talking about, the accessibility grant. Is that
Yes,
correct?
exactly.
Okay, I just want to make sure
Yeah.
there wasn't anything.
And then
else.
we could continue, and then there is the Live and Learn grant.
Yeah.
For
that could
another
be-
100, I mean,
yeah.
there's actually a much higher threshold. for
Yeah.
that. So we were talking about all this. Also, we had never really budgeted properly the restricted and the unrestricted donations. There's an annual amount of money that we receive on average from the Friends, and then there's an annual amount of money that we receive on average just as unrestricted donations. Depending on the future of the foundation, if something were to happen, that would mean that the remaining amount of the foundation money gets dispersed to the library after the CD goes. You talked to us about that. That would be in this fiscal year. So the maturation of the CD is next fiscal year, which is in here. So again, like that would be potentially restricted donation, maybe it would be unrestricted donation. I mean, that's not even taking foundation into account. I didn't take an foundation into account when I budgeted. This is just Friends. This is just Friends and then just general donations. So all that together, this last page is actually, you know, a lot more revenue than we typically get year to year. You know, I think with my grant writing experience, which is, you know, pretty strong with other grant writing experience in the board, I'm confident there'll be continued opportunities. And, you know, Bonnie has an interest to going to different companies in the area and soliciting donations from Abbott and AbbVie. That's not even reflected here either. So there is opportunity for financial injection for the library. But I wanted to be very conservative in budgeting with the finance committee. So that's how the budget is laid out for the coming year.
And just on the personnel service side, which
Yes.
is kind of where some of the big numbers are. You can see the IMRF part of that is 10,000, and then the Social Security is 7. So it's an extra 17 on top of the 150 that, or what looks like 142 for the differences in the salaries and staff salaries.
And I used the percentages directly because I knew the new salaries for those individual IMRF staff. So I just, extrapolated what that new salary was and the new percentage of IMRF that we would have to contribute. Same with Social Security, and just incorporated it there.
One of the other things then on the next line with the building maintenance, you can see that from last year it's 41, it's going down to 15. And we've talked about all, all the things we need to do with the library, but that's going to come out of some of the grant monies
Right.
and that are
Building.
being built in the building.
Without
thing,
restricting them to
without
that
restricting
line
it to
item.
that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the other, because I could have probably gone down more then, but the reason I didn't for building and maintenance is because we still have our HVAC contract. And that is quarterly payments for Midwest Mechanical to cover maintenance on all 4 of our, and so that is in and of itself about 10,000. It's money well spent. But there does need to be, I felt, some line in there that's not grant related that needs to pay for. We still don't have a building manager, like we're still gonna need to rely on Gary for a little bit longer until that's settled. We're gonna still have building maintenance costs. So that's why I didn't go lower. But that's to Bill's example, that reasoning, that's why we did go lower, because the grants are there.
I have an idea floating around in my head that when we initially got that $100,000 grant back in 2019, we were supposed to have already spent the money. No, that's not
No.
true.
No, it's not.
Okay,
And in
okay.
fact, even though we applied for the grant with a specific rationale and statement, as long as it's capital related, it will suffice and be able
Okay.
to be reimbursed.
All right.
Yeah,
I
but it's
also at first-
reimbursed. I think what you're saying though is right. It's reimbursable. So we have to spend that money out of our books before they give us the grant money.
That's what I thought.
Yes, but
Yeah.
but it didn't have to be done prior to being awarded the application.
Oh, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I
all
see,
right.
yeah, it can be a little confusing with the reimbursable
The
status.
grant that I managed in Minnesota was also $100,000 accessibility grant. It worked exactly the same way.
Okay.
We had to put the money forward and then I had to upload all the invoices and
Mhm.
explain, what category this was for,
Mhm.
and then they sent in direct deposit. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we have clearly spent easily that much.
Well, yes,
money,
but it's not reimbursable. So the grant period starts January 1st. And I have plans to spend it on the safety and security package that I emailed. So, armed doors, security cameras, armed windows, all of that. And we can talk more in our building grounds. I have a
Okay.
huge update for you.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I'm gonna have a quote from our company CVI, because we already had a quote for the security cameras. It was around 30,000 for the cameras and armed doors. But
What you're adding,
we're gonna add stuff, also a paging system. Remember, we
Yes,
talked about a
yes.
paging system?
absolutely.
That's gonna be in there. That's a safety piece. So I'm confident that we can bring the whole scope of that project close to $100,000 so that we can pay for things that we don't have to replace if we do a construction project.
Gotcha.
Cause like I could spend 100,000 on windows, but we don't know if the building design will change,
Right,
and also it won't cover. It's gonna be more than
What do you think
100,000,
goes
yeah. Correct. And there are things in the report about accessibility that's problematic outside, in sort of the entrances and the ramps. So we don't know if the footprint of the building is gonna change either. So I don't necessarily want to throw money at certain building related things if we
Hear
can,
ya.
yeah, so
Mhm.
Yeah,
just trying to pick and choose what
Mhm.
areas we could get.
There's just one thing on the there. I know when we talked about the 100,000.
Yeah.
And we have it as 86 in there, but on the grant side, we've got it in as 100.
So again, there are 2 lines for grants, and it's just funny because per capita is its own line.
Right.
So.
So the CAD was 82, 84. And then if you look to the grants,
Where?
I know I've got a separate one. And
Are you this last one?
yes, so
Okay,
that one there has got the 100 in it.
yes, so this
And-
is total amount, 158,284.
But when we come back up here, that 86 is down as 100.
So we're in expenditures. Did I miss? but no revenue. Well, first, let me start at revenue,
Yep.
because revenue is split between per capita and grants. Remember I added, hold on, where are you?
It's on the other page for the. It's here, the 84 and the 150 are separate for revenue. On the top
Yes,
this
thank you.
page. So it's on the
Oh,
flip
it's-
side of the expenditures.
Thank you for sharing, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I just want to double check both revenues and
Right.
expenditures. So revenues is correct because it's miscellaneous grants and gifts, 150, and then add the 8284 because of the per capita. And what you're saying for expenditures. Oh, I know the answer to this. Miscellaneous grant expenditures. Oh no, this number's wrong, isn't it?
Because the other thing we were talking about was that we're at the moment, we're going to use
Yeah,
the 31,000. And we talked about zero, not to go into the funds.
sure, okay.
Now,
But I think, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do we want to, well, the 84 is coming into this year, so it's not gonna come into it. I
No,
was gonna say, yeah, but,
but what we could do is keep it, knowing that in the end, it actually might not be a negative.
right,
There could be other, as I said, everything
Right.
is really conservative here. And this just shows that we are using some fund balance. I mean,
Right.
I'd be surprised if we got this PPRT and then we didn't use it for a year.
no, I agree with you. It'll sit in the funding, and then maybe that's kind of what we use so this will
This is
go up,
just,
this will go up to 100, that will go down then to,
yeah, sorry, thank you, Bill.
17.
That's much more palatable. And again, I still don't even think that we would use. Well, first, I think the board will probably want to use the PPRT money in some way.
Yes,
And maybe not all of it in this fiscal year. You may decide next fiscal year to use some of that PPRT. And so when you have a percentage, just for everyone else, the parentheses just mean that we're planning to spend some of our
Yeah.
fund balance there. I think 17 is very,
should we look at where we've got the PPRT on that line item and just putting the 17 in?
so we
it's a-
decided not to do that. So originally Bonnie was like, just put it up to 20 or 22, because we know we're gonna get at least that. But we're getting it in this fiscal year, we're
Yeah.
not getting it next fiscal year.
I'm just wondering if we use the argument that we're not going to spend it before all of it before May 1st, then maybe we could hold back with 17 that's negative and put it into the PPRT line as 22, and then it would just show that we're not.
But we're technically not. Once it's a new fiscal year, it's fund balance money. All the
Yeah,
budgets
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of, the lines,
I
the
know.
budget lines go away, and it's just part of fund balance. So it's not like we
Yeah,
would
it's not
actually.
coming in as
Correct.
extra money.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking, is because we're only gonna get 5 from the
Yeah,
village.
54, yeah.
5,400,
100.
yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, so the updates to this document will be to reflect my error here. The miscellaneous grants and expenditures will be the 100,000. And then together with well, no, it's not 100, is it?
it's on the other page, it's the 100. That's that one there, is this where your 100 is.
Yes, okay, yeah, because we're not talking these.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
other ones
those-
are already
sorry,
in there.
I got mixed up. So this is gonna be 100, and then the per capita stays, and then the fund balance, using fund balance is gonna be changed from 31 to 17.
That's kind of what the math looks like.
Yeah, thank you. So that'll be the update for the, motion. Little talking shop. Gotta get things there.
Right.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Bill. No,
No.
don't apologize,
No, that was
please.
No.
awesome.
thank you for catching that, and also I think this is a good change. Yeah, I just don't feel comfortable putting, we know why, we don't
Right.
want to do that.
So we can, shall I bring the motion with the changes then?
Please.
Okay, so get a motion to approve the budget for 24-25 with the miscellaneous grant expenditure 44825 going to the 100,000, which is the Illinois grant. And as a result, then the fund balance will be a negative 17 using funds going forward.
Discussion? I mean, I don't know if you want to discuss it.
I'm fine. If you and Bill are both happy with it, I'm fine with it. We just need a second.
Oh, I'll second.
Okay, Brandy.
It was just a lot to.
Yeah, so,
Sorry.
Bill, you move to approve it.
I'm going to
Yeah.
move to approve
Thank
it,
you. I
yes.
just I wasn't sure if that.
Did
Yeah.
you get the wording of his?
I got the word.
Right, yeah,
Okay,
no.
That's
Yep.
kind of critical.
Yep.
here. Yeah, and I would assume you will. be
I'm gonna
putting
update it right away. Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
great. And so we've had a motion and a second, so we need a roll call vote. Thank you.
Trustee Jerch,
Aye.
trustee Jardine,
Aye.
trustee Hayes,
Aye.
trustee Friedeman, aye.
Great work. Thank you so much,
Nice.
Board and Finance Committee. The last year, Ally and Sandy, I had weeks, I mean, maybe 4 to create a budget and work. Yeah, because I started January.
Yeah.
And we didn't approve the budget until February, so we're ahead of the game this year. I knew we would be.
Yeah.
I will never budget that short amount of time again, but I was also learning and I've had a full
Absolutely.
year.
Yeah, no, it's-
And I just have to commend the staff. There was a lot of red. You saw, we really budgeted a lot differently this year. And I'm always a fan of making sure that as a steward of public funds, we are budgeting appropriate amounts instead of, not. And I just, the first year of the budget, there was only one red, and it was like a $500. So I just want to commend the managers especially for taking a really critical eye, which I think we're just going to do going forward, to really make sure we're maximizing the budget and our funds.
No, great job.
Well done. Okay, the next action item is to vote to approve the 2024 per capita grant application. So Renee, it's all you.
So last year, again, I had a similar timeline. This year, I really wanted to incorporate the work that we have planned coming up. Last year, it was very, philosophical. Each section where it said, how can you improve the library based on the ILA core standards? The managers supported me a lot in helping write the grant last year, but really what the per capita grant asks you to do is review the core standards of public librarianship and take some time to reflect on how your organization can improve. And so all of the chapters in part 1, I've had a year of experience, and all of the examples are things that we already have planned or are in motion, or things that we've talked about. So at a later date, I'm going to bring forward the Illinois Public Library Standards 4.0 again, because that's an annual requirement of board members to be reviewing that every year. I didn't want to make you all read it this month, this board packet, but it is a requirement. We could talk about it more at the board retreat. And so part 1 is, examples of work that we are already either thinking about or doing, or more aspirational. You've seen my action plan with the staff, so it's incorporating a lot of that. And then the meat of the grant is part 2, which is how are you planning to use the funds? And this library historically has used the funds to purchase ebooks and digital audiobooks. Our digital collection, our digital book and ebook collection, as far as percentage of budget, is really low at this library. One of the things that I'm interested in is starting to, compare our library percentage of print materials versus digital materials. How much are we spending on print versus how much are we spending on digital? And where do we benchmark with other libraries? Because we can't supply the access to ebooks that this community demands without per capita. And so per capita is used specifically to address some of those long holds lists that those of you who are ebook users have seen. You know, Anna is our adult librarian and she looks at those holds ratios and she targets purchasing just for Lake Bluff users based on those holds ratios. And our current budget line does not cover it all. So that's how we use this per capita grant. Eventually, I would like to see our budget line reflect, so we don't have to rely on grant funds for collection-based services. And we can spend per capita on something else, because this is very flexible funding. But for the last several years, we've had to rely on it. And so that's the proposed amount. That's the proposed plan for our per capita to step in line with what we've done for the last couple of years. And we are a standalone library. Patrons really like the fact that when they come here, they could see a popular book on the shelf and most often get it. I have those comments. And the same with ebooks. They'll be on the line for, 50, 100, 200 people in front of them. And all of a sudden they'll get an update. Hey, you have the book now. That's because we were able to see how many Lake Bluff users had that book on hold, and we purchased another copy, and that copy just goes to the Lake Bluff user on that hold list. So yeah, it's a benefit.
Nice.
But we really do need the grant funds. And the article I sent that Martha sent along, there was a line in there that Mary Pergander talked about how we were so underfunded back in 2005, 2004. She reported to the news journalist that we weren't even eligible for per capita funds. And Bonnie talked about that in her speech. And so this is that fund. I mean, there's a certain amount of money we get per person in the community. We rely on it. We really do. So happy to answer any questions, but every year your per capita grant needs to be approved by the board, and I want to make sure you understand fully what the process is.
You did a great job hitting on a lot of highlights in here
Thank you.
that has happened in the past year or
Thank you so much.
upcoming. So just going through, I'm like, yep, long range plan, yep, HR source, yep, all of the heavy hitting stuff that's interdependent, but that is happening. So I think that's awesome.
Thank you so much.
When will you give us the actual stuff to read? Because I remember last time we divided it.
Yeah, we're not.
Divided up.
My hope is that can be some of the reading we do for the board retreat.
Okay.
And so, I have a link that I can send you anytime after today. I was gonna send all the board, I was gonna basically send all the reading material for the board retreat sometime between the January and the February board meeting. So February board meeting is the 20th. The board retreat is the 24th. You're gonna want maybe a month to read all the stuff. Like the building grounds has already read the building report, but you all haven't. And I want everybody to reread this. Jamie's gonna have some resources to review as well. So, not yet, but anytime after today.
All right. Yeah. Any other discussion, questions?
What is the timeline for their turnaround on approving, dispersing?
So just, Martha, can I rely on your memory right now for that? I know.
As far as when we get the check from the state,
Yes, I thought it was spring.
it can vary quite a bit. I want to say on average, it's typically been in the fall, but some years I think like this past year, it came early. Other years when something strange is happening with their budget, it may take longer than that. But I would say it's a pretty wide window as far as when the funds actually arrive.
Well, and thank you, Martha. And all of this is also related to our IPLAR, which never came to the board because it technically doesn't need to, but that's our annual state report of all the statistics. Our managers and I had a big lift last year doing IPLAR. And so it's usually the process is do your IPLAR, then your per capita, then spend your per capita, and then get your new disbursement.
Okay.
So roughly.
Okay.
Thank you, Martha.
Sure.
Um,
All right, so, do I have a motion to approve the Lake Bluff Public Library's 2024 per capita grant application?
I will move to approve the per capita grant application.
Thanks, Ally. I need a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Bill. I think we need a roll call vote for this.
Okay, trustee Church,
Aye.
trustee Jardine,
Aye.
trustee Hayes,
Aye.
trustee Friedeman, aye.
Thank you all very much. I'll submit it for the deadline of January 31st.
Fabulous. All right, so our last, action item under new business is to approve the adding a new meeting to the 2024 Lake Bluff Public Library Board calendar meeting for purposes of a board retreat on Saturday, February 24th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And I think we've already discussed this. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add. In the absence of any comments or questions, I will ask for a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the addition of a board retreat on February 24th from 9 to 1.
Thank you very much, Ally. Second,
I'll second.
and for this one, I believe we can have a voice vote. Go ahead. I guess I should say, that's me. Oh, my.
Yeah, there you go.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay. That has passed, so we're on for Saturday, February 24th. Great, that was quick. Okay, now discussions of the pilot hours, and I guess I could, did you want me to pass these out?
No,
to
everyone
everybody, or-
has a little bit of their own. And so last time I gave everybody a little stack. I'm encouraging, as we talked about in the engagement committee, do you want to talk about it? What we talked about?
About,
Being an ambassador for this, yeah.
well, I've been handing them out like nobody's business.
Look at you.
It's like, yep, so just handing them out, just so that people are aware, if nothing else,
Mhm.
you know, like other items too. that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But, you know, just so that people aren't surprised when they walk up.
I also think it's a really good conversation starter. If you go to a book club, if you have people in the area that you know, hey, did you know the library changed its hours? And they're gonna be surprised, why? And then you as a board member could invite conversation
Absolutely.
about some of the things you've experienced in your first few months here or your years on the board about our challenges and opportunities. So I have many copies. We can print more if you ever need them. If you know of places where you think they would be happy to have them, I can have Jill drop them off. So if you want more, that would be great. The other aspect of the hours pilot I wanted to talk about tonight, it's not going to be too long. Starting next month's board meeting is going to be reporting of the first month of the pilot. So today I'm reporting on December news. We didn't start the pilot until January 1st. We were working on the pilot, and you've seen already from last month write-ups of some of my initial feedbacks from community members. Next month, what you're going to see, and for the next 6 months following, is data. You're going to see a compilation of qualitative data. You're going to still see, comment cards. You're going to see emails. You're going to see summaries of conversations I've had with staff at our December meeting. Not only did we talk about HR source, we also talked about how has the news about the hours gone? And I have some really good anecdotal conversations to share with you all. For the majority of staff experiences, when they're engaging with people at the desk, it's surprise and people just wanting to learn more. But in my experience, aside from that one written letter we got threatening a lawsuit, in the mail, and outside of one in-person conversation that I had at last month's board meeting, or 2 months ago board meeting, I've had a lot of conversations with public and people actually just walking into my office and saying, hey, about the new hours. And I've sat them down for 15 minutes, just telling them more about the library.
Mhm.
expanding their awareness and some of the things that you all are very clearly aware of as our challenges. And I would say 99% of people have just been, I had no idea.
Absolutely.
Can I say,
Please jump in.
I've had so many people say, what can we do?
Yes.
Mhm.
We have a great answer for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do. But I think we need to solidify, like come up with a plan for them, like how we're all on the same page and how, we can all
Yeah.
have the same
Talking points.
response.
Yeah. And I think, that one of the feedbacks that Jenny gave me was the talking points were just helpful from like a 30,000 feet view. But when you have a one-on-one conversation with people, and as elected officials, you may or may not be experienced with having such a, being put on the spot. It can be difficult to navigate if you've never done it before, and having to kind of talk about the whole story and share with them those action steps. And I think the board retreat is going to be another great place for us to be able to, for the board to coalesce in terms of messaging. I think there will be a lot more work for the engagement community, but in positive ways. And depending on what the board decides to do for its financial future, there will be more opportunities for engagement with the public. I've worked at libraries that have gone for referendum. Staff have talking points, the board have almost like a training in and of itself to talk messaging.
I've had people ask about it, like not in a bad way, like, will there be a referendum? I'm like,
I say,
I'm not the person to ask because I
Yeah.
have no knowledge, but
and that's obviously nothing we've voted yet.
Exactly.
no.
We need to understand, the board needs to understand the financial opportunities presented in front of them. And that's where you can say in response, well, we've got a board retreat scheduled in February. We are going to be talking about that because, hey, I've only been on the board for 7 months, and I've learned a lot. Did you know our windows are original to the building? Stuff
yeah.
like that.
Mhm.
And so I think is you are comfortable, everybody's going to be different. Each of you are different, so in your own comfort levels, engage with those conversations. So this could be a conversation starter, sending the email, the article headlines about, what Dan Dorfman wrote about the hours. He emailed me about PPRT on the village agenda, and he's interested in all the HVAC issues that we've been having. He may choose to do another story, a follow-up. So all press is good press for us.
Absolutely.
I think truthfully, the conversation is people just don't know. And that just means we have to tell our story more strategically and loudly and transparently, which is why it was so important to me. And Martha did a great job writing it. Well, I worked with her to write it, the explanation of what happened with the HVAC. Like, I don't want to gloss over some of these issues, like a gas leak. I mean, some people were surprised that this could happen. I'm like, look, I think this board knows that that's not a surprise, but the outside perception is different. So
I know we talked about this a bit, but that idea of doing like coffee with the library director,
It's
like a
on-
state of the library.
Yes.
That maybe when we get to that 3-month mark, so it would be after the board retreat, like in March, being able to have something like that where folks can.
we're planning the spring newsletter right now, and I have dates identified. I haven't sent them to you, Martha, for the newsletter. We're drafting the newsletter right now. And so the design and finalization of that is like kind of the beginning, the mid to February. So there will be dates in there for coffee with the director. I also suggested at the engagement committee, maybe it's coffee with the director and a trustee, and there's a rotation of, one of each of you if
Yeah.
you want to pop into that.
And like to Janie's point, that you don't have to be the one
Yes.
always doing that, like at the village board meetings.
Mhm.
You're like, hey, we want someone to go have a rotating schedule.
That's another really great engagement strategy. So
I should just jump in here.
Yeah, please.
Because it's interesting that Drew and his counterpart at Lake Forest are having a thing at.
Oh, that's right.
Saturday
I saw that,
morning,
yeah.
talking about just issues in Lake Forest and Lake
Mhm.
Bluff.
is that different from tomorrow at the chamber breakfast?
I believe
I
so.
think
It
it's
is,
different,
it's
yeah.
just- Yeah,
Yes.
it's on its, I think
It's
it's Saturday
this
morning.
Saturday
They're doing like
morning at-
basically like a state of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what
thing.
they're
That's
doing
tomorrow.
tomorrow. Well,
Yeah.
so they do that at the annual chamber breakfast. And I went to it last year when I first started. Jill took me that. And it's this back and forth with big presentations on a screen. And that was at the breakfast. And I told Sandy that, and there's gonna be Regis there and like all these other people, great engagement opportunity. But it sounds like they're gonna
I
be
think
doing it
this is
again.
a different,
Yeah.
this is a different
Yeah, yeah.
deal because it's the village managers, not the.
No, the village managers are doing this tomorrow
But I
morning.
don't, how much, like, I read this as like a real public thing where I don't know if the chamber.
The chamber's
breakfast-
not as broad.
Yeah,
It's chambers and then the public is welcome, but they have to pay a $40 fee.
yeah, this is, I think.
This is open to
Open to
everyone.
everybody. Yeah, it's like
Yes.
just show up. So I
Yes,
think the accessibility piece, like I did not know anything about the chamber breakfast, but I did hear
Yeah,
about Saturday.
Yes. And
Uh,
so
Is
that.
anybody
that's
on the
just-
board going to that?
On Saturday.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
We might not, we might be going.
Maybe I should email to the board in case other people want to know, but I would say if you could go and report back at the next board meeting, that might be of interest.
Or maybe Drew would even share what the deck
I think
was,
it's
or
the same
if it's the same-
presentation.
it's-
I have a feeling it's the same presentation, but I'll ask him.
The other
That's really
thing
good to know.
they also do is they do at the newcomers club, the Lake Forest and Lake Bluff newcomers, wherever they have Drew and his counterpart Lake Forest come, and they actually do with like a bunch of different folks come and do like a quick 3-minute spiel, and then there's a trivia.
So we
Um,
talked
and
about
there's like
this.
Yeah.
that's only for people who've been here less than 5 years and mostly less than 2, but
Well, so one of the things we talked about in the engagement committee is the idea of having presence at Kiwanis, Rotary, all of these organizations, newcomers. You know, frankly, my capacity is not that I could do that.
No.
Right now.
Nobody.
And actually, we're trying to get on the agenda for Kiwanis, but there is every first and third Thursday, and I've got bylaws and finance on first and third Thursdays. So, but I think that that's really good to know because you all could be, as trustees, you know, we'll bring this to the engagement committee, maybe share these ideas.
Yeah.
and,
You know, you
Plan
mentioned the newcomers. We did something last fall with the History Museum, invited newcomers to come in, and it was really, really well attended.
Mhm.
And Kathy O gave her little spiel on the history of Lake Bluff,
Oh,
which
that's
is
lovely.
always very entertaining. She's just a hoot if you happen
Mhm.
to talk about it. And people had a great time. And there were a bunch of board members there just circulating and talking.
I've had libraries do programs like family friendly, all ages type of programs. New to the library, new to the community, learn about the library, like a 101. Hey, you might not like an actual invitation. But or like our library application in the folder of the newcomers, you know, so that when they're part of the newcomers group, they get all the information about the town. There's something about the library.
yeah.
But the other information I wanted to share with you about the hours. And this is why I'm so glad I had lunch with Ishwar. I forgot this. So the standards for Illinois Public Libraries has a matrix of recommended hours of service by population. And that is what's in your board packet. So, it's one of the last pages here. And I've highlighted for you our population. Now, the definition of minimum growing, established, and advanced, that's related to staffing. I would estimate that our staffing levels, in my opinion, are much closer to the minimum levels than the growing. You can hear our HVAC turned off. It must have been 9. Yeah. And so this is Illinois Library Association, based on your population, how many hours you should have open to the public. And they do recommend, you know, weekend hours in some capacity, evening hours in some capacity, even for the small libraries if they can do it. And so what I want to bring this data to the board to say, we are, with our change of hours, we're closer to meeting essentially the staffing requirement for the minimum, but we're still ahead. We're ahead of their recommendation based on our population. And you can see we're not much higher than 5,000. So Library is like,
At the low end of
yeah,
that
we are at the
scale.
low end of
Yeah,
that.
that's
Mhm.
true.
And that's why, Bonnie talking to the village board about Highwood hours only being open 36 hours a week. I mean, we're really, in my opinion, stretching our hours with our current staffing. You'll hear more from me next month, plus the data of how many sick hours we took on a monthly basis. Remember, I used to show you those, that data point too. You'll still see that. Staff have already seen an improvement in our ability to fill in gaps. We've had a lot of sick, obviously it's the winter, but to not rush to cancel a program, to still have our desks adequately staffed. And to the point where we have a new level of staffing requirements for our desks. We're never putting a sign up again, making sure there's at least one staff member for all breaks, for all lunches, for all meals. The change in hours has dramatically affected managers' ability to address those unexpected staffing situations. That will always come up. There will always be
Yeah.
sick hours. There will always be vacation.
Mhm.
And so we need to be able to plan for that. We've never been able to even consider that before because we've been stretched so thin and had to make some difficult decisions. But I will say, just from a management standpoint, the managers have been very pleased with the hours changed because we've not been in those tight spots, having to cancel or leave a desk unstaffed.
Good. So far, so good.
Yes, it would be interesting to do like when you present the data to the board the next meeting
Mhm.
is like, if we could do like a quick sort of like comms campaign, like
Mm.
pilot check-in
Mhm.
1 month in and do like the highlights and then reference like what you just put from like the Illinois libraries, like.
Oh, and
giving-
have the sources. and
Something
resources,
like, yeah, like that to be like, so that there's real transparency and like, we're giving you updates month to month. So at the 6-month mark, it's not like, oh, where did this decision come
Mhm.
from? But
I will say, just based on what you were saying, people want to know what they could do to help. I mean, that's the opinion of a lot of people who, once they hear the situation, oh, you have only 6 full-timers. Like there's just, surprise and people wanting to know those things. So I think that's a great idea, and always referencing this data. I mean, these are best practices recommended by the state
Mhm.
for Illinois. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
And with the new hours, is it 52 we're now?
I don't,
yeah,
so
I
my
just
brain
did
is so
that
capacity.
math, it's 52.
52, so
thank
we're
you.
right in the middle then of the,
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, I remember when I first brought a draft of hours to the managers, it was in the 40s, and they wanted to put it back up, and I'm glad we did what we did. I think that would have been potentially too dramatic of a shift, but at the other end of things, I'm interested to see both data, qualitative and quantitative. I want to see these evening numbers with our new data collector to see what our 2 evenings are going to be. Sundays continues to be the hardest conversation that I have.
yeah, that seems to be the,
It's the day that I think I talk about the most with patrons, that they're really challenged by. Winter, we're in the middle of winter and families with young children are just looking for something to do. The cost benefit analysis of having people in the building for 4 hours when we have to pay staff. Having 4 staff for those hours, whereas during the week, for evenings, we could get by with 3. The reason we don't is because we also need a person in charge. In our evenings, we already have that person in charge scheduled. That seems to be the biggest question that I'm getting, is Sundays. But some people have thrown out the idea of like, oh, could you do Sundays just for the winter hours? Could you do Sundays just for, the fall? And I think that's going to be the decision for the board to decide. I would need more staff to open again on Sundays, but it's only January 24th.
right.
So let us experience the rest of the pilot and give you actual qualitative and quantitative data to evaluate the whole thing. And maybe there could be an injection of finances in the next year or 2 that could help us with that. So that's what I have for the hours pilot. You'll see a much more delineated, and I have kind of a template of stats, and to your point of like including those resources. I think I will do that too. Thank you.
All right. Is there, there's no correspondence, so any and all other business which may properly come before the board?
This
You
is a
have it,
carryover
Dawn?
from last month. I apologize. I forgot
don't
to
worry about
list that. I just included a copy of the article from the newspaper. Dan Dorfman's article about the library. We're on the bottom here. Didn't quite capture the whole paragraph. Sorry about that. Got it. We scanned it, but the scan must not have been a proper scan, so.
Okay, so, we don't need an executive session for anything, I don't believe. So I guess I would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Bill. Second,
Second,
thank you,
yeah.
Sandy. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we're done.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
all.
much, everybody.
Appreciate it.